That would be good.
Not that we've ever done that. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Welcome to the Messy Middle Road Trip podcast. Today, we're talking to Theresa Torres, the owner of Forward Financial, about something no one likes to talk about, money. So many women in midlife are consumed with fear and anxiety about money. Will they have enough as they age? And what happens if they don't? Money is the number one concern for older women. But luckily, Teresa is here to teach us how to take control of our finances with confidence, clarity, and compassion so we can all live the life we deserve. Teresa has a background in the mortgage industry and started her company in February 2019 after finding her passion to help others through financial struggles. She's a dog mom of 2 and loves to travel. We know you'll love it, so hop in the convertible and let's hit the road. I'm Janine.
And I'm Nicole.
And we're entrepreneurs, wives, moms, and women who are fearlessly navigating the middle of life. We want to create a community of women over 40 who embrace the past, appreciate where we are now, and take action to live our best life because it's all about the journey. Hey, Teresa, how are you?
Hi, ladies. I'm good. How are you?
Great. Thanks so much for coming on the show. So before we begin, we ask all of our guests a very important question. If you could run off on an epic road trip with any person living or dead, who would it be? And bonus points if you know where you're going.
Okay, so this was a little bit tough for me. I was kind of struck down the middle on this one. It was a tie between, my stepdad passed away a few years ago, so it would be nice to have some final moments with him. However, I'm really deep into my faith, so Jesus would be the person I would love to have a drive with. So I know where, all of the places in the Bible to kind of just get the idea of like where everything was, how it really happened. And, my faith is not by sight, so it would be cool to actually see the person that like my faith is all about.
You want to get the info from the source.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, if that happens, I have a couple questions for you to bring with you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And Janine can totally plan the travel. So
I could.
It's all good.
That's true. That's true. I'll plan the heck out of that trip for you guys.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's a good one. So Teresa, so you and I met before the podcast, but you have an interesting story. And one of the reasons why you decided you wanted to help people get out of debt and create a more stable financial future. So tell us what your story is.
So I'll make it kind of condense it for you guys because it can be kind of long. About 8 years ago, I went through a divorce that wasn't absolutely terrible, but it left me with mutual debt on one income. And that happens so often to people. But it just was so hard to get through. I went through pre-foreclosure on my house. I spent many, many, many nights up thinking that my car was going to be repossessed. Especially, and that's so important when you have a job you need to get to, right, and to pay for these things. And so I spent probably 2 or 3 years not paying my mortgage to pay my car and then not paying my car to pay my mortgage. And it was just, 2 or 3 years full of just anxiety and just terrible feelings about money. It was probably 3 years in that I was able to modify my mortgage and save a little bit there. I did file for bankruptcy. And then right after I filed for bankruptcy, I took a Financial Peace University course by Dave Ramsey. And it totally, totally changed my life. It gave me back the control I needed with my money. And since then, I jokingly say I love my budget, and people kind of laugh at me because I'm like, but it gave me the control that I didn't have for those years. And it was really scary to go through that and to feel like so out of control. So to have the control back was awesome. So since then, it's been, 4 or 5 years. I have literally helped people without even knowing. I've just been sharing my story and they come to me for financial advice and I kind of just help people and I didn't even know I was doing it. And last January, I was really trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grow up. What do I want to be as an adult? And I shared the story with you, Janine. I was praying about it and it totally came over me. I'm like, oh, that's a cool idea. And I'm like, no, that wasn't an idea. I was actually praying about it and it came to me. And and it was financial coach just kept coming back. And literally, I started telling people about it, and the doors just started to open. I hired a financial business coach that just helped me grow and grow and grow over the past year. And it has just formed into this really cool thing where people are actually coming to me now for advice that I don't even know. People are like, oh, I heard from so-and-so that you might be. And I do this because I know what it was like. I know what it was like to struggle. And I want to share that it doesn't have to be a struggle. And even if there is a struggle, you have someone to come back to, or someone that you can turn to and trust that has kind of been through some of the stuff that you're going through.
So do you think that because of the struggle that you went through, that is what gives you credibility in people's eyes? Because talking about, no one, honestly, it seems to me that money is the one area that people are so funny about that they cannot get their head around, or they're embarrassed about. There's 1,000 things, but then trusting someone like you that with all your financial information, and plus things that could be embarrassing. Maybe they can't pay their mortgage, maybe. So you think that that's helped for you to make it the connection?
I think, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think so. I actually have a client that I had just a 30-minute consultation. I don't know her from anybody else. And when we were done, I told her my whole story. And when we were done, she goes, I am so happy you told me all of that, because that makes a difference. Like, I feel like I can talk to you about anything, and you won't judge me. And I won't, because money, like you said, money is so hard to talk about. And I want to help to break that stigma, take people out of that like scary money talk. Chances are everyone in your life is struggling financially somewhere, and it's okay to talk about it. And I think that's where, you know, as Americans, we never want to talk about anything that has to do with money.
I agree, because I think we vilify money, and
but we want it. I mean, that's the thing.
We want it, but it's from a scarcity mindset. You know what I'm saying? It's not like we put it out there like money is a bad thing, and we kind of bring our baggage to it with how we were raised, how our parents handled money, how we saw them operate, whether or not, you know, they were in debt or they just pulled money out of their wallet and gave you whatever you wanted as a kid. Like, that can really set the precedent for how we treat money. And the one thing I'm learning in midlife is that money can truly be a gift to give back and to serve with, and to think outside of yourself and your immediate family. Like, what could you do if you were given $1 million besides paying off your debt and setting your family, your immediate family up? Like, what could you do? And we don't stop to dream about that, to think about that. We're just worrying about paycheck to paycheck, and what do we have to, like you said, balance sometimes, or juggle. I'm going to pay the electric bill over the car payment this month to try to get through, instead of thinking about, well, how can I change this situation? We just settle to be in that rut, to be in that stressful scarcity mindset. That's a big piece of it, I think, too.
Yeah, and you know, to that point, I think that people, they allow money to control them instead of controlling their money.
100%.
And that's where a lot of that comes in, is because you're like paycheck to paycheck, and it feels like you have to do that, and you absolutely do not. There is freedom in money. Even if you don't have any, there's freedom. You can find it. Yeah.
I agree. So the statistics regarding the lack of savings and excessive debt in this country are staggering. Why do you think we've ended up here in this place?
So in my opinion, I think this is simply a problem of discontentment. I think lots of people will say they are content without realizing how truly discontented they actually are. One of my favorite quotes that I've just heard for many, many, many years is by Will Rogers, and he says, "Too many people spend money they earned to buy things they don't want to impress people they don't like." And so we're constantly doing this. Yeah, we're trying to keep up with the Joneses, but in the reality that the Joneses are likely just as broke or in as much debt as you are. And so many times, because we're discontent, we charge and charge and charge and charge to make up for emotional situations, or to have those cool things that everybody else has. And I think the same is true for when we send our kids to college. Many parents pick the most prestigious school, or they allow their kids to pick the school without considering how expensive it's actually going to be in the end. So like, you want all those things, but we're not actually looking at like, what's the final number actually going to be?
Right. It's funny. I had a conversation with a girlfriend of mine whose son is a senior in high school this year. And I was asking, well, what are the plans? Have you guys toured schools? And she said, he's thinking getting into some type of police forensics, but he's going to a local community college for the first year. Get his basic courses under his belt, and then he'll decide, because it's going to save us a ton of money, and he'll stay home and he'll commute and go. And, you know, to get rid of that stigma, like you said, of, oh, well, my child's going to X university. It doesn't matter. As long as they're getting their education, if that's what everybody decides is the right course of action, because sometimes it's not. And I think that we need to stop looking down our nose at that is a viable option to save money and still get a great education for kids and be able to transfer those credits if they do want to go on to a bigger university after.
Yeah, I think that college financing is a whole nother show because it's such a
for sure.
But I agree with Nicole. And I wonder too, like, you think about it, sometimes you'll have a $20 bill in your pocket and then it's gone. I wonder how much is that too, like, because I bought a coffee, because I bought a pack of gum or whatever it is, that all of a sudden it's gone, like in the ether. Yeah. And how much is that people just don't pay attention to the things that they buy day to day, you know?
Right, because we don't track it.
We don't track it. We don't pay attention to it. So clearly everyone is afraid of getting old without enough money to support themselves. I mean, you hear that all the time. And when we talk to the messy middlers in our group, money, finances come up all the time. Is this a bigger problem for women? And if so, why?
So, you know, I don't think that it's a bigger problem for women now. I do think generations before us, and I did a little bit of research about the different generations, but they call them the silent generation. I didn't know they called them that, but 1925 to 1945, I think they spent a lot of time not working outside of the home. And so for them, when their spouses pass away, or, you know, whatever happens, usually passing away in that generation, they just don't know what they don't know. They haven't spent any time doing finances. They haven't spent any time doing any budgeting or paying the bills at all. I think as you go into the boomers and the Gen Xers, that, you know, they have spent more time working out of the house and they've broken away from staying home. So as, you know, these generations get older, I think they kind of have a better idea of what's happening with their finances. I don't think it's specific to women. I think that people in general, if they're not planning properly in advance, that it can be just more difficult no matter what. And I think a lack of preparedness is where that comes in. And I think, you know, especially for, you know, needing money as you get older to support yourself, you know, talking to a retirement or financial advisor early on, and even if you can't do it early on and you're like in the thick of it, talking to them, they will give you the right way to go, I think is the best place to really go with that.
And I bet, so the lack of knowledge or lack of preparedness for that generation, for the older silent generation, that must put a huge burden on their kids, because if they can't pay and finance themselves, then the burden falls to their children. So that it just snowballs and leads to problems for that family. Yeah.
And it's, you know, I think, Jeannie, when we talked, we kind of spoke about that, but I personally have that happening right now in my family, where my grandmother's kind of needs, you know, she needs some extra help, but there is no preparedness there. So it's falling on my mom and my aunt and us, you know, and so it is. It definitely affects as it trickles down, right? The whole trickle down effect, it definitely happens with younger generations.
Well, for your mom, that, does she have to tap into her retirement to take care of her mother and, on and on. And then that means you'll be taking care of her. Right. So as it goes.
Yeah.
That's okay though.
Yeah.
That's right. Teresa's going to get them all settled. Going to get all their finances.
We're starting now.
Right. It's all good. So clearly, Teresa, you don't work with just women, but anyone that needs help getting their finances in order. Why is financial literacy so important?
So, money is the biggest stress for Americans. That alone, having less stress, I think is one of the greatest reasons why being better financially is important. But I also believe, money intertwines with everything that we do. If you think about it, even for a couple minutes, most things that people care about drop within three topics or three categories. It's health, wealth, and relationships. And if you think about it even more, money runs through all of those and intertwines and is always at the center of what you're doing. We don't ever want to say like money buys us happiness, but it does, buy you some medication so you can be healthier, or buy you a gym membership so you can be healthier, or things like that. So I do believe money is everywhere you look. And if we can just own that and start to just kind of put some things in place to be better, the rest of your life kind of comes to be better too.
Well, money doesn't buy happiness, but not having money causes a lot of misery for sure.
Yeah.
And stress and divorce and 1,000 other things.
Mm-hmm.
So being financially healthy is super important, which is something you talk about all the time. So how do you know if you're financially healthy?
That's a good question. So financial health to me, like I look at it almost like physical health, where it can be measured by certain things. So instead of measuring it as the amount of steps you take or how many times you went to the gym, you measure it in like how much is in your savings account, how much are you contributing to your retirement regularly, how much debt do you have. But most importantly, when it comes to financial health, I think of it and I go, do you have the things you need? Do you have a house? Do you have transportation? Do you have clothes on your back, food to eat, and are your utilities paid for? And that right there is like your best basis for financial health, in my opinion. And then going from there, have all the basics and then keep growing. I think that financial health is different for every person. But I feel like it's more of a feeling than it is actually, I have $30,000 in my savings account. That's awesome. But how do I feel about that? Do I feel content with what I have, or do I need to keep growing and acquiring things? So for me, I tell lots of my clients that it's about direction and not perfection. So if you're moving in the right direction, then you are very likely building really great financial health for yourself. Also, I talk a lot about financial maturity. And when you feel like you're financially mature, I think you're finally getting the whole financial health thing, if that makes sense.
So can you be financially healthy if you have a lot of credit card debt?
I think you can be. I think it's more of a mindset than it is. If you're working on paying off that debt, I think you can be financially healthy and feel healthy, if that makes sense. I feel like that does.
And there are a number of people, I think, that get a credit card bill. They charge everything, but then as soon as the bill comes in, they pay it in full. So that's a health, it's what comes in is going out. But I want to ask you, Teresa, for midlife folks, I read somewhere that we should have at least $1 million in savings combined with retirement accounts, et cetera, if we want to continue living the same lifestyle that we're accustomed to. Is that kind of the ballpark that you would suggest? Like $1 million for a lot of people. For me, it's like, whoa, how do you wrap your brain around that? I mean, I love watching David Bromstead with $1 million homes that he does, but to wrap my brain around $1 million it's hard.
So you have to think about our life expectancy now when it comes to those kinds of numbers. So that is saying you're going to retire at 65, 67, and that you're going to live the exact same life you're living now. So yes, $1 million would probably be where you want to be. But you have to consider some of the other things that come into that. Are you going to stay in a home or, a large home? Are you going to downsize to like a condo or anything like that? Are you going to move to Florida and live in a trailer? Like you could totally do that in retirement, and the cost is way less. So I believe, yes, $1 million is probably the sweet spot plus whatever else you have. But that comes down to, again, those numbers are so different for so many different people. Are you married? Are you guys going to retire at the same time? What are you guys going to do in retirement? For me in retirement, I want to travel. I want to be able to travel. And so, yes, $1 million is probably what I need. And for those that feel like they're starting out too late, I do believe there are places and there are people to talk to that will help you kind of guide you into exactly what it is you will need in retirement and help you kind of focus on those things.
But I think one of the big things is, of course, we don't know how long we'll live and we don't know what our health will be like. So I have an aunt who just passed away in her 90s, and she was in really great shape for a long time, but she was in assisted living, which is expensive, super expensive. And then of course, at the end, she needed a lot of care. It's so hard to know and whether or not that's the sweet spot, because you do see a lot of older people having to go get jobs and to supplement their income. So it is scary to think about how to wrap your head around that.
And Teresa, you mentioned going through your divorce. I know that's a big deal with women who have gone through a divorce or who are widowed, facing financial hardships. What do you recommend in those cases?
So it's going to sound simple, but I totally recommend just getting back to your basics, the financial basics. I recommend this to all my clients that are facing hardships. And the best way to stop from completely spinning out of control, because that can happen when we go through life, hard life things, is to take back the control you can. So even if it's very simple stuff like budgeting, even if it's just budgeting for a day, this sounds silly, but like meal planning and grocery lists, those things can make your day-to-day decisions way easier when you're dealing with big life decisions. So when it comes to finances, literally, putting a budget into place, figure out what you can afford. Can you not afford to pay your credit cards right now? Then it's okay, and I think that's a lot of people too have that. They have a problem with I can't pay all my debt. Well, your house and your transportation and your utilities are way more, and your kids are way more important than paying a credit card. I know credit card companies will hate me for saying that, but it's true. I would, and so what? It goes into collection, whatever, you'll bounce back, right? But I'm totally about go back to basics and what is it you need to do right now today to make your decisions a little bit easier.
And you could still pay the minimum on a credit card to kind of limp along for as long as you needed to without going into collection and without ruining your credit. So there is that wiggle room. It's not ideal, but it's there.
No, and I say that because that's what I had to do. I had to stop paying all my credit cards, but I don't want people to feel like, well, I have to pay this, and that to survive. I'm like, you don't really, and I'm not trying to get bad financially. So it puts into perspective exactly where you need to be in life, I feel.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I think even the boomer generation, I just experienced my uncle passing away and having a conversation with my aunt about that. Like you said, he was in charge of the bills. He was in charge of the passwords. He was in charge of all of that. And she felt like she was floundering after he passed, and her sons had to come in and basically hack the computer and figure out and help her communicate with the bank so that she could get access. And I see a lot of that with codependency with couples. And one person is in charge of one set of things in the household and one person is in charge of the other. And I think it's so important to have those conversations and to at least know where everything is, even though you're not in charge of it, take that responsibility, like you said, even though it can be like scary and be like, I don't do math, he's doing it, whatever. Yeah. You have to step outside your comfort zone a little bit and just be prepared. Hopefully you don't have to go through a big life-changing event like a divorce or, losing your spouse, but having that conversation and at least having an awareness of where everything is and how to access it, I think is a huge piece.
And I think it's not just, I don't do math. I think it comes back to, we've had this conversation on the show before, Nicole, about not wanting to talk about death. That people are in denial, or to think that maybe your marriage might break up. No one wants to say that out loud. Right. So to actually like have a real conversation and say, well, what if something happens to you? What will I do? I think that's an important piece too.
It is.
So we're all about tips. We love giving people tips. So give us some tips about what we can all do to improve our financial situation. What could we do today?
Yeah. So my biggest tip is to be realistic when it comes to making a budget. Many people jump into their budgets and go, I want to do this and I want to do this right this moment. So something as simple as, lots of people go, I want to put 10% of my income into savings right now, but they're not putting anything into savings right now. So my tip there is start small, do 1% for a month, 2% the next month, and just gradually increase it so that it's not a shock to your system. Because what happens is when you white knuckle your budget like that, or you go all in too quickly, is your budget tends to explode. And it just doesn't work. Lots of people, that's what they find too, is that's why their budget didn't work, is because they went all in too quickly. Another tip is, if you want a big ticket item, and I usually say $300 or more, sleep on it. Absolutely sleep on it. Speak to your spouse or a trusted friend about it before you go and purchase. Have an emergency fund in place. Start with about $1,000, and that will help with the next tip, is get rid of your credit cards. Stop using them if they are a slippery slope for you, and you cannot seem to pay them off every month. Get rid of them, and then that way, that $1,000 helps you with your purchases or your emergencies. And the biggest one for me is pay cash as much as you can. There's lots of psychology and studies behind using cash instead of swiping a card, and how there's way more feeling with cash. But I also believe just using cash also creates this awareness for your children too. While they watch you use cash, it's different. I recently have had 3 or 4 different conversations about how their children didn't understand, so they would swipe their cards, and their kids didn't get that they had to pay it back later. They're like, just use your card, just use your card. And so when you use cash, it triggers it for you, but it also triggers it for your kids too, to see that. And then another one too is to track, if you are feeling out of control right now with your money, track your everyday spending for 2 weeks. Just track every penny you spend. And this can be very eye-opening and will change your habits very quickly without you doing too much. I just did a challenge with some of my followers to just pay cash for stuff. And the feedback I got was that I'm not just spending cash, but I'm not buying things because I know I need to report it to you. And that's kind of the thing. If you're going to track it many times, you won't buy that 50-cent pack of gum because you don't want to write it down. It's just like when you're on a diet and you have to write everything down. You're not going to eat this because you don't want to write it down and be accountable for it. So those are some tips that I think are easy and you can do like right now.
Those are good, because I do think just the whole accountability piece of it. So if they're reporting to you or to a friend or even just to themselves, it's hard to be honest, and you do start to notice the little weird things that you buy that you don't need.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that, like you said, then you can assess. Once you've tracked that for a few weeks, you can say, you know what, we're going to stop buying water bottles and we're going to start carrying stainless steel reusable water bottles to cut back on that, which is better for the environment anyway. But certain things then you can try to tweak and adjust as you go on. If somebody is listening to this and they're like, oh man, do I need services like this and advice like this because my debt is through the roof and I feel like I'm treading water. why is it so important to give ourselves time and grace to set things right?
Yeah. So, many times we are far, far harder on ourselves than we would be on anyone else, or we would allow anyone else to be on us. And this rings so true in our finances. And that goes back to our conversation about stigma, is that we just don't want to talk about it, so we just kind of sweep it under the rug. And then we also feel at a certain age we should have everything together. And it's such a fallacy that we should be that way. And that creates this need of being perfect, and we're never going to be perfect. So there's that grace piece, right? Giving ourselves some grace to give ourselves a break, that we are not where we think we should be. We're not where our peers are. We're not, it's just that whole, like, it begets itself when we get to that point. So statistically, for a budget, it takes about 90 days or 3 months to work all of the kinks out of your budget. So I always tell my clients, you've got to give yourself some time here. And after 3 months, you've likely found the things that you forgot about. That happens all the time. You forget about this one or that one. And it also allows you to ebb and flow with those variable items. So if you have groceries, or, you get a better feel of what your average is going to be when it comes to your budget. As well as, it takes a ton of time. If you're paying off debt, it takes a ton of time to pay off debt. It just does, especially if you're keeping your income the same and you're learning to pay that off. You got to give yourself some space to really focus on it, and then kind of set up a realistic time frame of paying stuff off. Excuse me. And I always say, celebrate the small wins as you go, because it gets hard, after a few months in, it gets hard to do these things and to continue to give yourself the grace and time and all these things. One thing I have started doing for myself, I have a savings goal, pretty big savings goal for this year, but I actually started this color in sheet. So every box is a certain dollar amount, and but that helps me to see hey, you're moving in the right direction. And so I've started to create some, and I'm going to roll some out to my clients so that as they go through their debt payoff or their savings plans, they can kind of see that it's going to take time. However, they're moving in the right direction.
I love that. And I think it would work well too if you were going in the reverse, that if you are paying your debt, you owe X amount of money for school loans or whatever. Mm-hmm. And each time you make a payment, you subtracting that off and you're getting closer to your debt. I love those visuals. I have Post-its for that, for my own financial goals that I do, or for business goals. So I think creating those visual charts and graphs for yourself, tracking it, in a journal or a Excel spreadsheet, that's a great tip. I love it.
Yeah, I like that too. And I think it's important to to ask for help when you need help. I think that we've talked about this a few times, about the sort of the embarrassment, the shame, but if you need help, ask for help. Why not? You'll get there so much faster if you have somebody to coach you, to rely on. So I think that women, we have a hard time doing that because it's always us. We're always doing it. So if you're listening, reach out for help. Go find Teresa and ask for help. So, and on that note, where can our listeners find you, and how can they connect you and find out more about your coaching and your financial forward programs?
Yeah. So my business page, so my website is forwardfinancialcoaching.com, and my Facebook page is facebook.com/forwardfinancialcoaching. I am live on Facebook every Friday at 6:30.
Janine, are you getting that, or is it?
Yeah, it's
Hey, Teresa, hold on a sec. We had a big gap where all of a sudden your Wi-Fi connection went wonky.
So
I was just telling Janine that.
Can you start from your website? So Teresa, where can our listeners find you and find out more about your coaching and your financial forward programs?
Yeah. So you can find me at forwardfinancialcoaching.com. That's going to be my website. And then you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/forwardfinancialcoaching. I am live every Friday night at 6:30 and for about 15 minutes. And we talk about anything, usually financial. Sometimes I like to talk about some mindset stuff and to kind of help you get better with your mindset before you get better with money. And sometimes we just have fun. So I do that every Friday night. And then, you can find me there. You can find me on Instagram too. My handle is Forward Financial. No coaching in that one.
And do you help clients both in person and at a distance?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. So I actually like to Skype with most of my clients. Just to make it easier, and it's way more comfortable. I find that they get to be home and not, they don't have me in their homes, kind of. I am via video. So I like to do Skype, so I will help anybody in any area. Also, my first consultation is a half hour, and it's always free. So your first meeting with me is always free, and it's a great time to just get into what it is that you guys need, or my clients need, or what it is I can share with them to help them be better. And they always leave our consultations with at least one thing that they can work on before we start coaching.
Nice. Is that your dog barking?
Yep.
That's okay.
That's okay.
Just giving a little pause. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Messy Middle podcast and feel inspired to understand your finances and get help if you need it.
If you want to keep the conversation going, visit us on Facebook, Instagram, or at messymiddleroadtrip.com. And if you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a fabulous 5-star rating and review so we can reach more amazing middlers.
We're looking forward to our next road trip with you. Until next time, thanks for riding shotgun. Yay!
Yay! Thanks for Teresa. That was awesome.
That was a great show.
Thank you.
Great content.
Good.
I think I forgot to thank you though while we were on the show, but thank you.
I get it. Thank you.